A Jewish refugee family sought to flee persecution in 1832, and of all the places in the world, they decided to find refuge and safety in India. In a matter of years, these refugees were dubbed the Rothschilds of the East. The family in question has gained a lot of popularity as a result of their large-scale charitable contributions. They constructed hospitals, schools, everything. The real source of their wealth, however, came from taking millions of lives. Despite all of this altruism, it is thus not surprising that the British Empire was the family's strongest ally. Hold on tight, as we will delve deeply into the Sassoon family's history and their sinister empire today. Mumbai is one of the wealthiest cities in South Asia today. Many people view it as India's financial, commercial, and entertainment center, and its economy generates a GDP of over $300 million. But if you start digging into the history of the richest city in India, you'll find that the name of a Jewish family keeps coming up. They're the Sassoons, too. In the 19th century, they fled persecution in Baghdad and relocated to Mumbai. It was known as Bombay at the time. The port was a British colony. Despite losing much of their fortune when they moved, the Sassoons were still able to use their international networks. They had a great eye for spotting promising company possibilities and a wealth of prior business expertise. As a result, they soon realized that Bombay would become a major trading hub. They began making significant investments in cotton mills. Soon after, far into the 20th century, their company was the main driver of Bombay's prosperity. Later, the districts that housed these mills became the epicenter of the new billionaire Raj in India. These neighborhoods now dominate the skyline with their opulent skyscrapers, shopping centers, and office buildings. As I indicated before, the Sassoons were also very generous. They provided the city with libraries, synagogues, schools, and hospitals. And many of these institutions are still in operation today, serving the people of Mumbai. In a sense, their impact influenced the city's civic and cultural life in addition to its economy. However, there was an urgent need to conceal money underlying all of this charity. This is due to the fact that the Sassoons' primary sources of revenue were not real estate or textile enterprises. Drugs were involved. The Sassoons were wealthy because they smuggled opium into China. You know, British India farmed opium extensively at the period, when it was the most valuable drug in the world, and that trade became dominated by the Sassoons. This family was thought to control 70% of the global opium trade. Furthermore, the Sassoons were extremely wealthy, considering that opium made up around 14% of Britain's total revenue from India. The Sassoon enterprise was powered by trade profits, which also funded their investments in Bombay. They were so wealthy that the British even made them members of their nobility. Take a moment to consider that. In what was effectively a racist empire, a brown family was receiving the unique distinction of being admitted into their aristocracy and granted equal standing. They simply were that strong. David Sassoon started the Sassoon dynasty's history in the late 1820s. He was Sheikh Sassoon bin Saleh's son. Bin Saleh was the head treasurer of the Baghdad government for a long time. The family was influential because of their position, but it also put them in danger. David was intimidated and even taken prisoner when the governor of the infamously avaricious city became antagonistic. David first fled to Iran with his little family out of fear for their safety. Although the relocation provided them with short-term safety, he quickly looked for more security and better economic prospects. Both of those items were promised by British India. The British administration welcomed Jewish minorities to work in the growing trade sector because there was no risk of them rebelling should they grow too rich. I mean, the number of Jewish people was so insignificant that the British never felt threatened, so they invited them. There are even some claims that a British political agent may have encouraged the Sassoons to settle in British India instead. Now, David's decision to move could not have come at a better time. This was due to the fact that Bombay was gradually becoming Western India's commercial gem. Its prosperity was based on cotton and opium, and the British were extending the city's position as a major international trading hub. Now, David didn't come with nothing. His father's meticulously developed network of Middle Eastern merchant contacts was with him. At a time when these networks dictated whether a business would succeed or fail, these connections provided him with exclusive access to markets, money, and trust. It's crucial to remember that this family was not your typical Baghdadi merchants because they were aware of court politics. David sided with the British colonial ambitions as soon as he got there. During a period when the majority of Indian subjects were regarded with mistrust, his allegiance earned him shelter and trust under colonial rule. Within the confines of that empire, David was aware that a profit could be earned. He therefore followed British wars and conquests. Additionally, he expanded his assets by establishing companies in the new markets brought about by the British Empire's development. However, the opening of China's enormous domestic market brought his family the greatest profit. As you are aware, there was a huge demand for opium. I wanted to briefly summarize the reasons behind China's heavy opium use. According to history, the British were interested in Chinese porcelain, tea, and silk. There were no barter trading relationships because China had no interest in British goods. Therefore, the Chinese requested payment in silver for the tea and silk they sold to Britain. The British were losing their silver stockpiles as a result, and it soon became economically unsustainable for them. Meanwhile, all of this silver was being amassed by the Chinese Empire. However, from the British point of view, there was a significant deficit because they were not purchasing anything from Britain. In order to address this issue and reverse that gap, Britain inundated China with opium that was being farmed in India. Opium, as you are aware, is a very harmful and addictive substance, a product that would cost silver to buy in China. The British were able to expand their influence in Asia and balance their trade deficits in this way. What about the Sassoons? They quickly became the leading opium exporter by taking advantage of this, and it was a huge size. The firm sent more than 30,000 chests of opium to China in 1836 alone. These chests would weigh about 120 pounds each. Imagine the magnitude of this then. In China's coastal cities, this type of drug deluge led to widespread addiction. Millions of people in China suffered as a result, developing an addiction to one of the most harmful chemicals ever made. The Sassoons, however, were getting incredibly wealthy, and influence comes along with that money. In Bombay, David Sassoon became well known. His family was highly regarded for their charitable contributions. Ordinary Indians didn't give the family's financial situation much thought. The hospitals under construction, the ports, the libraries, and the new schools. The family, after all, was well admired and respected for this. The younger Sassoons continued this tradition even after David's death. The Viceroy, the top British officer in India, personally presented them the awards. I'll give you an example to show you how well liked and influential they were. They established a system whereby Bombay's tramways provided special Sabbath permits to Jewish passengers, allowing them to avoid handling money on Saturdays. Their influence was that great. Now, the Sassoon family's notoriety and impact extended beyond India. They were able to obtain privilege in Britain itself and close connections to the British government. The standard was established by David Sassoon. In honor of his empire, he was awarded British citizenship in 1853. Such a status was uncommon among colonial subjects, and it signified the family's ascent into the British Empire's inner ring. In terms of their standing in British society, later generations would go much farther. They bought grand residences all around England with their opium money. They were able to socialize with the royal family and move in with the wealthy because to these estates. As I mentioned before, the Sassoons are often referred to as the Rothschilds of the East. The Sassoon family, it turns out, began to mix with the real Rothschilds. The Sassoon family's interests and the empire's were inextricably connected. In 1859, for example, 500 people gathered at their opulent Bombay mansion, and this was a major disaster because the British were throwing a celebration of their intention to impose even more direct control over India. And it was a massive celebration. Thus, incidents such as these showed how closely the Sassoons had linked their riches to British imperial authority. The ruling elite was acknowledging the Sassoons as peers and supporting Britain itself. Reuben Sassoon, David's son, is a prime illustration of this. He quickly grew close to the Prince of Wales, who would go on to become King Edward VII, as the position and access to the heir was unprecedented for a family who had only been refugees in India a few generations prior. Their strategic union with the Rothschilds also contributed to their increased renown. The marriage of a Rothschild daughter to Albert Sassoon's son strengthened the bonds between the two Jewish houses, both of which were essential to British imperial ambitions. The Sassoons provided opium to help Britain's debilitating trade deficit with nations like China, while the Rothschilds funded war and conquest. Now, there was also a bit of an identity crisis brought on by the Sassoons' persistent attempts to be British. The Sassoons were quite uncomfortable and mortified that their Indian cousins were paying them a visit. The conflict between the Sassoons' Eastern heritage and their white ambitions persisted despite their wealth and titles. The opium trade and India were key to their prosperity, and in not too long, their fortune was going to soar to unprecedented heights. Indian opium exports were facilitated by Britain's triumph over China in the Opium Wars. A brief recap of the opium battles once more. In essence, China and Great Britain fought two wars in the middle of the 19th century. They clashed over opium legalization and trade access. Following all of this, the Sassoon Company's opium traffic skyrocketed to around 59,000 chests. Drugs were now freely available on the Chinese market. Naturally, the Sassoons rose to even greater spheres of control as a result of the wealth created by this commerce. Following David's passing, Albert Sassoon assumed leadership of the family business and continued it. He was granted honorary freedom of the City of London in 1873. He was thus the first Jewish individual to get this honor. By then, not even a Rothschild had been recognized in this way. It represented, after all, how significant the Sassoon name had grown in the eyes of Britain's elites. Even outside of their drug business, their notoriety eventually became well established.
They were smart enough, after all, to put that money into respectable companies. The family had made bank, insurance, and real estate investments, beginning with David. The Sassoon family was able to weather the financial crisis that rocked India in the middle of the 19th century, as well as the decline in the cotton market. New businesses also followed. The Sassoons invested in real estate projects around Europe, an American railway syndicate, and Hungary's national debt. In essence, the family owned a diverse international business. All of this, however, was essentially a respectable front for their main operation, which was the sale of pharmaceuticals. Long into the 1920s, the Indian opium trade into East Asia remained a major source of wealth for the family. Long after China and Britain had formally decided to stop this commerce, this occurred. The Sassoons changed with the times as well. They adopted new technologies, like the telegraph, which enabled them to conduct business across continents. By purchasing steamships to carry their opium, establishing marine insurance companies to safeguard those ships, they also vertically integrated their empire. They were everywhere, really, from the beginning to the end of their whole business plan. The Sassoons were making money, so they didn't really care that much about the moral outcry against opium that was growing in Europe and India. Abdullah, or Albert Sassoon, even commissioned a family crest that boldly displayed a poppy blossom. And that's basically the origin of opium. All of this was business to them, one of which they took great pride. Albert Sassoon, or Abdullah Sassoon, may have believed that the family business would endure forever. The following generation, however, started fighting among themselves for money, and disagreements were so intense that the family enterprise was divided in two.
David Sassoon and Company, the original company that created the family's wealth, was on one side, and E.D. Sassoon and Company appeared on the opposite side. Another familial branch was in charge of this breakaway endeavor. These two companies turned into fierce rivals despite their familial and blood links. Because both businesses were involved in the same trade that had brought the Sassoon family's wealth, the rivalry became particularly acrimonious. It was opium, too. Additionally, the next generation would encounter yet another issue, which amused me a little. It is a lack of enthusiasm. David Sassoon and Company was inherited by the Sassoon family's London branch. However, they lacked the motivation to manage it. For them, the company was more of a source of riches than a company. Instead of engaging in the laborious task of commerce, the majority of family members favored extracting wealth to support their extravagant lifestyles. This estrangement quickly evolved into contempt. The very source of their wealth became hated by some of the descendants. One of the family members poked fun of their wealth by saying that it was earned through filthy dealing in the East. Such comments demonstrated how far the family had strayed from its roots, for a dynasty that once prided itself on its poppy emblem. By 1939, David Sassoon and Company was directly owned by the Sassoon family. This innovation finished completely. It had deteriorated to the point where the British government deemed two of its former partners completely unable to hold directorships by the 1980s. Meanwhile, E.D. Sassoon, the other business I had previously mentioned, took a very different turn.
Victor Sassoon was in charge of that. Victor now made an effort to preserve the business. He took the risky decision to go to Shanghai, the thriving commercial center of China. Victor began liquidating the company's Indian mills and assets to pay for this change, frequently at very low prices. Victor anticipated turmoil if the Indian National Congress ever gained power because he feared its rise. So, at least initially, Fortune magazine praised him as Shanghai's top realtor by the middle of the 1930s. It was believed that his properties were valued between $1.2 and $1.5 billion now. Additionally, there were some humanitarian effects of this move. By 1939, Shanghai was one of the few places where Jews could arrive without a visa in order to escape Nazi persecution. Many of the more than 20,000 refugees that arrived had nothing, and the established Baghdadi Jewish community, of which Victor Sassoon was the most well-known member, embraced them with open arms. All of this sounds fantastic, but these would be their company's last years of success. As you can see, China quickly implemented extensive nationalization policies. Assets valued at more than $1 billion in today's currency were taken from the Sassoon enterprise in Shanghai. Thus, Victor's worst error turned out to be his audacious move. The Sassoon company as a global force came to an end with the fall of Shanghai. Their dominion was officially over. Some people continue to assert, informally, that the Sassoons never truly vanished. Instead, they only became more adept at concealing their wealth. All sin is concealed by money, and nowhere is this more evident than in the Sassoon family's story. The Rothschilds of the East were a family who started out as exiles from Baghdad. Following British imperialist wars, they exploited the situation and created empires based on drugs that killed millions of people. Indeed, they were highly regarded and involved in charitable endeavors, but ultimately, their kingdom came to an end, and they faded into obscurity due to their own choices and internal family structure failures. Given how infrequently riches like theirs vanish, some claim that this is just what they most likely desired. Rather, under different names, they disappear, resurface, and reappear. Additionally, you may view my film about the Rothschild family here, which I believe you'll find fascinating. I appreciate your viewing, and I hope to see you again soon.